care about your health. 2 locations, Governor Square and Grand Harbor. Refill and transfer prescriptions online. Call 947-8900 or visit healthcarepharmacy.ky. Also brought to you by Cayman Medical Center, Cayman's most awarded private medical clinic.
And UHealth, International University of Miami.
World-class healthcare in the heart of Miami.
The Light Room, your holistic sanctuary for physical and mental restoration, repair, and rejuvenation. The power that made the body heals the body. 38 Pasadora Place, Georgetown. Find us online at www.thelightroom.ky or call 938-HEAL.
For the Health of It with Tara Bush.
Attention HR managers and business leaders. Want to boost productivity, reduce absenteeism, and show your team that their well-being matters? The Lightroom now offers custom corporate memberships designed to enhance energy and mental clarity, reduce stress, and improve overall health, creating a healthier, more focused workforce. Invest in your team's well-being because a thriving team leads to a thriving business. Visit thelightroom.ky to learn more. It's a new era in wellness.
There's nothing more important than your health, and seeking expert healthcare with physicians you can trust is what you deserve. UHealth, the University of Miami Health System, offers peace of mind to you and your family with a first-class experience. Our patient coordinators assist with everything you need before, during, and after your stay with us. As South Florida's only academic-based health system, UHealth offers cutting-edge treatment, compassionate care, and life-changing results just a flight away. Learn more at umiamihealth.org/international.
When I first started going to Healthcare Pharmacy, it was because it was convenient. But over the years, I continued to shop there because I trusted them. One day I was picking up my prescription, and the pharmacist noticed an over-the-counter medication in my basket. She said, "I hope that's not yours. It will interact with your prescription." And I thought, wow, thank you. Trust is so important when it comes to your health. Healthcare Pharmacy with 2 locations, Grand Harbor and Governor Square, where they care about my health.
Hello and welcome to For the Health of It. I'll be interviewing Dr. Larissa Johnson. She is a forensic psychologist and trauma specialist who is currently working in the UK, but she keeps her local ties with the Alex Panton Foundation as part of their clinical and educational committee. Hello and welcome to For the Health of It.
Hello, Ms. Tara. Thank you for having me again.
You're most welcome, Dr. Johnson. And this is part 2 of intergenerational trauma. Today, we're going to be covering trauma, abuse, gender roles, and healing. So, I'm going to start off with abuse as a part of our hidden legacy. Cayman has a painful history of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, often unspoken. Do you know how widespread this is?
Yes, it's very widespread across the country, but it isn't widely spoken about. There are also a lot of barriers to attempts to obtain more information to learn exactly how widespread it is.
Well, that's good to hear that we're trying to dial in because we do hear about it quite a bit. How does this shape our collective behavior, parenting styles, and relationships?
Well, that's a big question. Okay, so abuse shapes behavior largely through modeling and mirroring. So what we see, we practice. So for example, a child might grow up witnessing violence. They might learn that love is supposed to hurt or that violence is how you resolve conflict. And there can then be patterns of abuse that get transferred to the next generation because there's no awareness around the harm that's being perpetuated. And we can then see this in parenting when individuals parent their children in maybe the same harsh ways that they were parented, and they kind of pass down that legacy. The other thing is when abuse is present, but maybe it's not acknowledged, it's not allowed to be spoken about, people can grow up to be on edge, hyper vigilant. They could keep secrets in order to try to avoid conflict, or they could just completely disconnect from their feelings. And that's another way that can shape parenting, because that can look like being overprotective or maybe emotionally distant and struggling with trust. But we can also see this manifest in relationships, because if we have learned that closeness can also be unsafe, then intimacy can feel complicated and confusing. So what we're talking about are these patterns that kind of just ripple outward. They're not just isolated incidents.
As a clinical psychologist in the prison system in Cayman, did you see this a lot? Or are you not
A
allowed?
lot of the manifest, well, what I would see is what were presentations or manifestations of historical trauma and mistreatment. And I think individuals who are imprisoned, I think what we can see is the way that intergenerational trauma isn't just linear. It doesn't just work vertically, it can also work laterally. So I say that to mean the systems around people who are imprisoned aren't necessarily set up to support them in the best of ways. Some of these systems can actually lead to re-traumatization, and whether it could be completely indirectly and unintentional, but some of the structures that we see in the systems meant to isolate and punish could be reminiscent of some of the abuses that people had faced earlier on in life.
Wow. So sometimes we perpetuate the circle.
Correct. Yes.
By
And I don't think most people are intentional about that. Really, they are, maybe just not as knowledgeable about it, and so they unintentionally are reinforcing some beliefs that people hold, and also are unintentionally perpetuating some of the traumas.
So why does unaddressed trauma often reappear as perhaps addiction, violence, and emotional disconnection?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to understand that these behaviors are very often attempts to cope. So aggression or violence, it could be used as a means to mask fear or a sense of powerlessness, like let me make myself big and scary so you stay away, because you coming close is really scary. It could be a way of trying to feel safe or regain agency, take back my choice, and this feels like the only way that I can do that. Addiction or substance use often plays a role in trying to numb ourselves, maybe when safety feels like it's just out of reach or distress is really overwhelming. And then emotional connection, or maybe even dissociation, another kind of survival strategy to just escape pain when it feels too much, too fast, too soon. And these aren't, just like bad behaviors, and I think we should be mindful that we're not labeling them as such, but kind of reframe the narrative that these are symptoms, manifestations of a system, a body, a spirit that's just trying to manage overwhelming stress.
How do we step outside of that?
How do you mean?
Okay, we're hearing a lot of this lately in the world. Something, we know better, so we do better. How are we able to help people or families know their parenting style or the addiction that runs deep in their family? How can we work with, say, families who are manifesting this intergenerational trauma to step outside of the norm and say, hey, I want to do something different? I mean, part of it is the show, but is there something else that the system is neglecting to do?
Well, I think we need to bring it into our awareness in the first instance. So if it is still being brushed under the carpet, then what is it that we're even talking about? If no one else is saying it's a problem, then is it a problem? So we do need to kind of, highlight that in the first instance. Start really small. Use clear language. Point out that, this is what I have seen, and there is an alternative way to do this that won't, cause harm. I think also the language that we use is really important. if something is abuse, naming it as abuse instead of mistake. Something is harmful, naming it as harm instead of this issue. But this is something that we have to build up, and it has to become part of the lexicon that we use when we talk to each other. It needs to become part of our common language. It needs to be destigmatized. So that means it needs to become more and more and more common. So it needs to be spoken about in the first instance.
I really hope that this show will, it's starting to talk about it, and you're right. We have a sexual abuse issue. We have a domestic violent issue rather than a high incident of sexual abuse, a high incident of domestic violence. So,
correct.
All right. Calling a spade, so to speak. Now, Cayman is for the most part, at least I think so, is a traditional matriarchal society, right? Where we held the women, we held things together, but at the same time, we live in this duality that, socially, it's more male-led. What are your thoughts on this?
That's an even bigger question than the first one.
I know, and it's you're in the UK, you want to sleep.
My thoughts on women, carrying a lot of the emotional load, and while being in a community that is traditionally male-led. My thoughts on that. Let's see, where do I start?
We only have a half an hour.
I think a lot of women, but speak to Cayman, but we see it across the region. We are, largely the emotional anchors for our families. So we manage the children's needs. We have to make sure we're keeping on top of family dynamics, make sure we're involved in the church or in the community in some way, make sure the household don't fall apart, house don't get set on fire, need to think of all the logistics. While at the same time, very likely working a full-time job.
Yeah.
So we are holding a lot of responsibility at the same time. So when we think socially and structurally, the positions that men have in our community are typically in leadership and authority positions, and not so much picking up or sharing as much of that emotional load, the cognitive load that comes in terms of running a household. And so then women can find themselves carrying a great deal of responsibility, but maybe not always feeling equally supported or empowered. And so then what we can create unintentionally is this pressure for women to feel like they always have to be strong, holding things together, but in reality they're just always coping, which isn't the same thing as living. Rest starts to feel unsafe. Asking for help is uncomfortable. Expressing any kind of anger or dismay can start to become risky. It gets labeled as maybe some kind of instability or neuroticism. So then this trend can lead to a lot of suppressed frustrations, but then also a lot of exhaustion and burnout. That's as succinct, I think, as I could be.
Wow. I hope women listening to this will make a change. What would you suggest their change be? Just learning to ask for help without feeling guilty? But if you carry that for a lifetime.
Yeah, and I think, like, in all the things we've been speaking about, it takes a community. Because, I can make a choice that I want to make these changes, but if it's not accepted in the spaces that I'm in, it makes it so much harder to make those changes. Those changes actually don't feel safe. If I want to express, hey, I'm under a lot of pressure, I feel stressed out, and I don't know that it is sustainable for me to continue in the way that I have been carrying on. And there's a very different meaning that you will take if someone says, I hear you, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I hadn't noticed, let's sit down and talk through what's going on for you, and let's support you to kind of make this more manageable, versus someone who says, well, I've been here 30 years and I never felt stressed, so what is your problem? So it's in terms of trying to make these changes, it can't just land on the individual. This is a societal
Yeah.
undertaking.
Yeah, and we're pack animals, and when we step outside of that and get labeled different, or what did you say? We might get labeled as
Difficult or neurotic
yeah,
or
but
emotional.
you're not insane. You're just doing what's right for you. Not just, but you are doing what's right for you in that moment. Why do survivors often protect families, churches, and communities rather than themselves?
Right. So I would say we are still a collectivist culture. I view us as a collectivist culture. We are at our foundations collectivist, even though we are highly influenced by the individualistic culture in the US. But in that type of culture like ours, where we have collective foundations, our identities are deeply tied to, you said we're part of a pack. We're pack animals. So it's tied to belonging. So these spaces, your family, church, community spaces, these aren't just social spaces. We're not just going to interact in a social manner. These are spaces that offer us safety and survival and are integral to our identity. So when harm happens within those systems, speaking out isn't just like, this isn't just a me problem. It can feel like I'm risking my entire support network. So I have to weigh up, what's the cost of exposing this? I could not be believed. I could be ostracized. I could divide my community. And so then in the end, I end up deciding protecting the group feels safer than protecting myself.
Wow.
And so it's just a case of, this isn't like a sign of weakness. This is a case of, I always say to people, good brain, good body, good spirit, because your nervous system knows what it's doing. It's saying, what's the least dangerous option for me, right? I guess then my work becomes just putting the mirror up and saying, well, the tragedy here is that by protecting belonging in the short term, we then allow harm to continue in the long term.
I really hope that people listening will just take a deep breath and sit with that for a second. And what you said earlier about your nervous system knows the difference. So you're not making people feel wrong. This is something that people do to protect themselves in the collective.
Correct.
How does shame get inherited even by those who never were directly harmed?
So just to, I guess, quickly just talk about what shame is. I believe we maybe touched on it last time. So it's the feeling that we are fundamentally flawed, right? So unworthy of love, of belonging, I am bad is essentially the core belief. So when something painful happens and it isn't explained, I'm thinking of a child now. Children can sense the emotional atmosphere. So they sense the tension, the avoidance, the heaviness of everything, but they're not given language or a context for it. And shame grows, it festers in silence. So without any other explanation, what children are inclined to do to make sense of what they feel, they tend to come to the conclusion that, it must be something wrong with me. The reason my family is broken apart is because of me. I have done something wrong. And that's just one way that shame forms, even if, someone wasn't directly harmed. But over time, the secrecy, the unspoken stories, the shameful stories, they move down family lines. So it's not like shame is being deliberately taught or anything. It's just absorbed through the emotional signals that we're picking up, absorbed through the silence. So we observe what is said and definitely what is not said. And we observe that there are certain truths that are not safe to name out loud. And then when we think about, communities like ours shaped by historical trauma. So we have colonialism, we have enslavement, we have even, history of colorism, color hierarchies. External shame can then become internalized. So when you have systems in place that are teaching people they are less than, that message travels through generations unless it's actively challenged. So that's just another way that shame can get inherited.
Does this show up differently in boys and girls or men and women?
I think shame, and not to be super reductionist, but just speaking from clinical experience, shame is typically a withdrawal emotion, but I think it manifests differently in men and women. So we might see a male choose a more aggressive route, and it's still, in a sense, an isolative emotion in that sense, as in it gets you to stay away from me so I can be alone with my shame. And then in women, it's more cut my communication ties, isolate myself, don't really talk to anyone. I don't want to be seen. Being seen becomes very painful. So these are a couple of the ways that it often presents when people come to see me in therapy.
What does healing intergenerational trauma look like?
So healing intergenerational trauma doesn't need to be anything dramatic and big. I think it just needs to be relational. So we touched on this before. Awareness, that's where it starts. So noticing patterns without judging ourselves for them. So it can look like learning to regulate our nervous system so we're not reacting from old survival patterns. It looks like telling the truth in safe spaces. So we reduce secrecy and we give language to experiences that were previously not named. It also looks like boundaries, so saying no when something isn't safe, protecting our emotional well-being, teaching the next generation that their needs matter. And it also, I would argue most importantly, looks like compassion. So recognizing that many of the behaviors we inherited were once survival strategies, and gently choosing which ones we want to keep and which ones we're ready to set down.
Would you have an example of this?
I was thinking of this today, and I was thinking about Gimme Story. I think how we represent stories of pain in our own language and our own dialect can be really important. And using, it doesn't need to be in the Gimme Story format, but I think that's one way that we can communicate and educate on stories of harm and abuse and the different ways that it can look. And not trying to minimize the harm done, but I think media like that are ways that are able to highlight the issues in a way that's accessible and digestible for people.
Yeah, I saw that at this last Gimme Story, and I wondered, why the heck are they using domestic violence and the high incidence of cheating on spouses in this format? But hey, you're saying it's good. Because
if it gets the message across sometimes, but you want to make sure the right message is getting across as well.
Well, it exists is what I
Yes.
got. So we're not hiding it anymore. It wasn't rude or it was just, this is Herring Cayman. And I was like,
Yeah.
is this a place for it? It made me feel uncomfortable initially, but
Good.
I understood it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
As it should, yeah.
Yeah, because it is uncomfortable.
Yes.
What gives you hope when working with intergenerational trauma?
Well, last time when we spoke, I said trauma travels, but so can healing. So the same channels apply. So as trauma can travel through stories and relationships and your biology, so can healing. So repair can also be carried forward. I've seen people begin to understand their patterns, and instead of feeling shame, they feel compassion towards the self and towards others. They start being able to accept compassion from others, and that allows for a major shift to take place. I'm also really excited and encouraged by a lot of the curiosity that's coming into my sessions now. So more people are asking questions about family patterns, about history, about, well, what is the nervous system? How do I regulate this? And so that curiosity is very powerful. And so when people become curious instead of defensive, that's where I think generational cycles can begin to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people are saying, as well, this generation I'm hearing is saying, I want to understand this and I want to do it differently. And so that gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, this leads me into what is our responsibility to the next generation.
To not be perfect. Again, comes back to awareness. It's to be more aware. I think we need to notice what is it that we are carrying, what burdens are we carrying, what potential harm are we pushing forward. We need to be able to pause long enough to decide that, is what I'm carrying something I want to pass forward, or do I want to interrupt the potential passing of pain? We want to create emotional environments where children can name feelings without fear, questions aren't going to be punished, and mistakes can be repaired. Okay, and we want to be able to tell the truth about our history without shaming ourselves. It's not there to embarrass or shame or humiliate anyone, but we want to give context, because that means when we give children context, then they don't internalize blame. Yeah, so that's what I view as our responsibility. Let's increase safety, reduce secrecy, and let's show that healing is possible through just speaking about it, showing that we're building awareness and that we intentionally do not want to pass down pain.
So if there's one thing you wish Caymanians understood about intergenerational trauma, what would it be?
I think just speaking through all of this, what I always want people to understand is when you are looking at an individual or a family or a group of people, and you think that's a bad person, or this family is dysfunctional, or that community or group of people is harmful, I would gently encourage people to reconsider those labels, because what you're seeing might just actually be a manifestation of individuals trying to heal from harm. You know, everybody carries a story, and when we don't understand or acknowledge that there is a story behind your thoughts, your behaviors, your emotions, when we don't allow space for that fact that there might be a story, we can turn towards blame. But when we do understand and we acknowledge that, we can more readily respond with compassion. So, you know, there's this, you're familiar with trauma-informed care and approaches. So there's this whole movement of, we move from thinking what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And I would extend that further to say, what meaning did you make from what happened to you? And so I think that's a helpful lens to use.
So we're nearly to the end now. What would healing look like if we allowed ourselves to tell the truth compassionately?
I know it'll look a myriad of ways. I think it's being able to say that this happened without necessarily meaning that someone gets destroyed or has to be cast out. And we're not attacking our elders, we're not attacking our culture. I think it just means compassion here just means adding context. It also means we need to allow grief where there was once silence. We need to be able to feel safe enough to say this hurt me or this hurt us. Yeah. And hold that dialectic that this was harmful, but also maybe this was a way that my ancestor tried to survive.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, we're in a different era now. Things are way easier. We don't have to go to sea. We can go to the supermarket to get our food. We don't have to grow ground food. Things are a lot easier. We can argue about the food all day long, but, you know, we live in a different world where we can live and earn our living on island. Our education, some of it can be on island, some of it can be off island. But we have choices. I don't think there was a myriad of choices before. And life was certainly a little bit more difficult. So we do live in a different time, and you're encouraging parents and young people to acknowledge what is. And if they do acknowledge what is, not to defend, not to gaslight and say, no, that's not happening. I grew up in a household, unfortunately, with my alcoholic mother. You know, we all knew something was wrong, but everybody was like, nope, nothing's wrong. So it took me many years to trust my instincts. So I'm hoping people understand the damage that can do, that undermines your trust in yourself. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap this up?
Starting small. Start small and relational. I think, like I said before, use clear language, but just hearing you speak about your own experience makes me think about, and you mentioned language the last time, so like what language families can use instead of silence. Maybe, when you think about validating someone, you're saying things like, I believe you, it wasn't your fault, you didn't deserve that. How can I support you is a really good one. How can I help? I think creating spaces where difficult topics are not automatically shut down. Being uncomfortable, like you were at Gimme Story, yeah, these things are not meant for comfort. They shouldn't be. Being able to sit with the discomfort while offering safe spaces, I think, is going to be very helpful, and giving language to this is going to be very powerful as well.
Thank you. I've been interviewing Dr. Larissa Johnson from In Mind Therapy. She is a forensic psychologist and trauma specialist, currently working in the UK, and who remains in local contact with the Alex Panton Foundation as part of its clinical educational committee. Thank you for being on For the Health of It. We are moving you to the life you want.
Are you feeling anxious, overthinking, or stressed, struggling with sleep and focus? Your physical health may be suffering too. Research shows that stress directly impacts your well-being, making it harder for your body to heal. At the Lightroom, we're here to help you find your balance. Our unique facility promotes the theta brain state, which is your body's natural way to achieve restorative rest and repair. Visit us at the Lightroom, Pasadora Place in Georgetown, and let us guide you back to wellness, rediscovering tranquility and harmony, because you deserve to feel your best. Call us on 938-HEAL or book online at www.thelightroom.ky.
If you or your loved one is facing cancer, only Sylvester will stand firmly by your side at every step, from diagnosis through survivorship, providing you and your family peace of mind and assisting with everything you need before, during, and after your stay with us. Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center is South Florida's only NCI-designated cancer center and specializes in treating the most complex cancer cases. Your first-class cancer care is just a flight away. Learn more at sylvester.org.
When I first started going to Healthcare Pharmacy, it was because it was convenient. But over the years, I continued to shop there because I trusted them. One day I was picking up my prescription, and the pharmacist noticed an over-the-counter medication in my basket. She said, "I hope that's not yours. It will interact with your prescription." And I thought, wow, thank you. Trust is so important when it comes to your health. Healthcare Pharmacy, with 2 locations, Grand Harbor and Governor Square, where they care about my health.
This is For the Health of It with Tara Bush. Brought to you by the Health Services Authority. Caring people, quality service. Visit hsa.ky.
For the Health of It with Tara Bush.
Brought to you by Healthcare Pharmacy, where they care about your health. 2 locations, Governor Square and Grand Harbor. Refill and transfer prescriptions online. Call 947-8900 or visit healthcarepharmacy.ky. Also brought to you by Cayman Medical Center, Cayman's most awarded private medical clinic.
And UHealth, International University of Miami.
World-class healthcare in the heart of Miami.
The Lightroom, your holistic sanctuary for physical and mental restoration, repair, and rejuvenation. The power that made the body heals the body. 38 Pasadora Place, Georgetown. Find us online at www.thelightroom.ky or call 938-HEAL.
For the Health of It with Tara Bush.
If they are talking about us,
living in your head rent-free all this time,
we must be relevant.